It is 6:13, so a day off for many of us yesterday, but for the unions a day to remind us how awful life is, how our rights as workers are being undermined, how collective bargaining is under threat and new laws planned by the government will make life of the workforce increasingly miserable. How you make a living as a unionist has always baffled me. It seems a job of constant angst and upset and fury and distrust and mistrust, an us and them sort of job where you're continually in a battle or a fight. Fortunately, the union movement is not what it was in numbers and influence. Remember the Employment Contracts Act? It gave people a choice as to whether they belonged to a union, and when they got the choice, most chose not to. In fact, only about 15% of the workforce is involved in any sort of collective deal these days. But you can see the jobs that are still heavily unionised. They're the jobs that cause the trouble, the jobs with the industrial action. And you can look to most workplaces of any size and see the units that are represented heavily by the unions. And almost always they're the same units or departments that are the slowest to change or increase productivity or show a general willingness to be in any way or shape or form modern. The basic premise of a union wasn't a bad one back in the industrial age, and in places like China or third world countries they're probably still useful. But in a modern economy like ours, by and large, talent is hard to find. We hear this over and over again. Talent is hard to find. And once you find it, it's generally reasonably well looked after. Unions run their Labour Day lines of doom largely because they're under threat. They're becoming increasingly irrelevant, and there are lots of people who make a living being a unionist, of course, and if unions vanish, they'd be out of work. So it behooves them to paint their ongoing picture of servitude and tragedy. I've never been part of a union, walked into work at the age of 16 with not a lot by way of bargaining clout going my way. But what helped was attitude and work ethic, and with those you get the pay rises and the opportunities. What unions rely on is brute force, blunt argument, and an archaic belief that you get more every year because, well, 12 months have passed, not because you've necessarily done anything to deserve it. The student unions, they were the same. They argued compulsion when it came to membership because they knew full well the moment it became voluntary, you'd be taking your life into your own hands. Given the rush for the door would be so large, it would become dangerous. Unions, if they were right, and things really were bad, would be flourishing. Like anything, success comes from demand. The fact they find themselves in the state they do, and having to peddle their messages of doom on public holidays, speaks volumes about them being the architects of their own misfortune.